Welcome everyone. The topic for the day is methods for KPI designing. We will be talking about the various factors that needs to be kept in mind while forming or while looking for the key performance indicators. Remember what we are looking into it. The KPI selections, how do we go around it? First, we need to understand what is it in practice. Thereby, what can be collated as far as the metrics are concerned, the sources thereof. We'll talk about the techniques, the selection techniques. Remember, we will have n numbers of data. Not every data are pertinent. Not every data are relevant. So we need to filter everything and come with a selection criteria altogether thereby as for the techniques. So let us understand the key learning points that needs to be done away with. First and foremost is to design a well structured KPI selection process. Recognize the usefulness of KPI selection sources thereof and the selection techniques. So these are my learning points or the output of the what the audience will learn from this particular altogether. So allocation of KPIs for each of the objectives. First and the foremost thing, if we parameterize parameters on the balance scorecard, which I am sure most of you are accustomed with it. The balance scorecard has the four quadrant. The four quadrant being that of the finance factor, that the customer satisfaction thing, the internal process, and the L&D, the learning and development code. Oh yes, it's mentioned out here. It's the financial comes is all about the increase in profitability, maintaining of the financial discipline. Now, what are we looking at it? We are reducing the operating expenses. Yes, definitely yes. The percentage of employees meeting the professional development requirement, as in the skills and the knowledge that is required to be there. The grievances handling of the internal customers and the external customers. When it becomes an internal customer, it might be grievances, but it becomes related to the external customer, it becomes translated as complaints. So we need to go look after it and the new methods, the new customers, the new things that needs to be satisfied. Remember, customers is all about the satisfaction that is there. This is what we need to understand altogether. Expand the reach. Obviously, yes, expand the reach that needs to be understood every now and then. Internal processes is all about optimization, that is facility management and improving patient waiting times. The absolutely improving the time or the service delivery process altogether. This is what we are looking into it. Remember, the KPIs is all about the budget variances, the innovations ideas, the employee engagement index, the training hours per full-time employees, the FTE that we are talking around it. Under L&D or learning and growth is what we are going to go across as well as the nurturing of the engagement, creativity, innovations, then the development of the workforce skills and competence comes around it. We are ensuring talent availability. That is what we are looking out here. We will be talking about the market shares as far as the KPI list is concerned. We have a net profit margin. We will have the wait time that goes around it, the net cash flow, and so on and so forth. This is what we are looking. So, n numbers of indicators, n numbers of metrics can be populated through a list about the business that we come across about the business, and I'm just giving a generic viewpoint to understand. So there are three techniques, and we will be presenting our presentations on or this particular video on these three techniques exclusively. That is preparation of KPIs, facilitations of KPI selection, and the follow up thereby. Under the first one, we will be talking everything. Remember, these are the three things that will comprise this content of this presentation. Let us move to the first party as to what the scope clarification is all about it. The first point, you remember this, what I've said? All the 3 points will be delivered and discussed today in this presentation, defining what needs to be measured. Remember, anything that measures can be improved upon. It is your objectives that we are looking into it. It is the scorecard. Now, what is the scorecard? Is the percentage of objective that you have achieved. It can be 100%. Usually, it is 100%. Acceptable will be somewhere around 85 to 90%. No, probably just of an average is anything around 70 to 85%, and below 70%, probably you are going for a rethink as far as the changes in the environment and things like that. We will be talking about the processes. The processes are all that activities that takes place in an organization and can be reflected very well in the dashboard. So why? The channels of selection process on a clear path, on a specific scope and the output that has been done as expected out there. scope clarification is what we are into it. The KPI sources, what are the sources of KPIs? We have n numbers of sources, on which the gray one is mentioned as a from the external sources, and rest would be done within the organization. Within the organization, we can scope about the workshop board, which going to be speaking to the board of management. We are going to talk about the administrative issues, the historical data, the compliance thereof. It's everything within the purview of the organization that we are detailing into it. That under the external sources, what will be the parameters that comes around it? As far as I am concerned, the regulatory authority or the industry standard that we are talking about it, the benchmarking is the best practices that has been there within the industry, the competitors, how well are they doing it, and the external list that needs to be manifested. What is the external list? Probably something which is to be something which has to do with the compliance in terms of the laws, in terms of the regulation, in terms of the environment, you name it, and we have it. Now, these are essentially your key performance indicator sources that I am trying to focus upon it. So here we go about the internal and external process. Remember, this means zero being within the ambit of the company, and one is without. It's beyond the ambit of the company. On the plotted on the x-axis, and on a y-axis is your primary data and the secondary data that we are looking into it. So when things are on primary and on the internal things, it is within the board, within the managers, within the frontline employees that we are talking around it. It is everything to do with the frontline employees, the managers input, the board input. But what happened when we have no control over it? Let us, depending upon the primary focus, but still at an external level, this is what your suppliers, the vendors, the customers are talking about it. These are your specialists that we look into it, and the discussion forums, and probably things that needs to be taken into account. Let us move to the secondary attributes. The secondary attributes within the internal component would be the development, the mission, the vision of the company that comes around it. And whenever we speak about strategic development, we are talking in terms of 3 to 5 years or beyond that. So annual business and strategic plan that looks around it, the annual reports that goes around, and the internal operational reports that has been there. Yes, as in the secondary category with the external respect, I have mentioned two wonderful websites for you to understand or go for further study in case if you are interested in. That is smartkpis.com, and we will be providing with the annual reports of the organization. Now, this is what we are looking into it. We will be talking everything with respect to this orientation as for the catalogs are concerned, be it printed, be it online. Now, these are all your secondary data that needs to be collated and probably figured out as to your organization is concerned. Again, one of the website that I've given you for you to understand is KPIs.com, smartkpis.com. Please visit it for further details around here. Let us understand with the KPI Expo, as we still continue with the first segment itself, as to what kind of data needs to be collected, curated, and presented. This is what we need to understand, and why such data has to be collected, why it has to be curated, why it has to be presented, is to have an information, education, and inspirations around it, so we can absolutely figure out touch points, the relevant requirements that will determine the outcome of our decisions or the anomaly within the organization. Now, how do we go across it? Is consolidating the list from the external source, like the smartkpis.com that I've already said it to you, using internal sources to identify KPIs, like the operational that we keep on figuring it out. Remember, KPI clustering, how do you go about it? One of the major factors of the KPI clustering is grouping them together, grouping them in a separate categories altogether. I have stated about the BSC method or the balance score method perspective altogether. We can speak it on the basis of the objectives. Remember, every KPIs for the finance department vis-a-vis the marketing department will be completely in opposite direction. Finance will be controlling of the cost, whereas the marketing will be saying make more expenses so that we can generate more sensitization and bringing more revenue. So this is what we are looking at, is this dashboard section that comes around it, VFA or the value flow analysis stage, which is going to be added, the value added at every stage of the operation of the company. That is very important, the process steps thereby. So why? Enables significant alignment and identification of the possible gaps that we need to understand. Why should we do the KPI clustering. The question is all about alignment. The question is all about identification. KPI clustering, the scenario was, if you are the part of the management, the team operating in a industry altogether, what does it come across? How do we removes if there are any impediments with it? You have to present, or probably the board asks you to present at least 5 KPIs you will be able to track. Now this is what you got to go around it. So first and foremost thing, write down the 5 KPIs you would like to recommend, and on a single post-it note, post it per team, and this is what which has been given to you. As far as an example is concerned, remember, we have said about the finance, we have said about the customers, we have said about the learning and development, and the internal process that comes around it. These post-it notes, and you will feel people will come to you, talk to you, generate ideas, contribute certain kind of ideas towards your KPI. They might be critical of it. They might give an alternative suggestion. Everything helps you to understand, figure out what are the vital 5 KPIs that you into it. Then this is what KPI clustering is all about it. Moving to the next segment altogether, the second stage, remember, is why. Focus on the question. This is why KPIs, why is it relevant, why do you go about it? Let us have understand with an example what numbers of objectives are going to be achieved. Did I say objectives have been kept, might be kept lofty? You might achieve 100%, 90%, 80%, 70%, and below 60% probably is unacceptable out there. So what processes are we going through? How long will it take? What will we learn from the data? What matters, and so on? We need to understand, frame those relevant. So frequent question that comes in your mind is this: what we are figuring it out. We will be figuring about the relevance out here, as in what are the most relevant KPIs. Now these are the FAQs, the frequently asked question. What is the order of importance, as in the priorities of the KPI that needs to be analyzed? Who should be doing it is one of the parameters that comes across your things. What is the ideal format of KPI selection process? This is very true, very pertinent, and should be addressed everywhere. So most relevant criteria, as in whether it is acceptable, whether it's going to be exciting, whether it's going to be deferring or deterring, or not acceptable at all. So what are we trying to achieve? Now during KPI selection, you have so many questions to be asked. Let's say how many KPIs? Usually 5 to 8 is the best methods, best number of KPIs that needs can be monitored. What are the procedure for validating KPIs? What process are we going to through, and how long will it take to make it figure it out in the best possible fashion? What figures will reflect the achievement of the company altogether? What sort of data we need to keep a track? What matters? Essentially, what matters? Question to be prepared in each of the cases. How do we map the result? How do we? What are the effort that goes around it? What will we learn from the data and the KPI? With the bonus that comes around, this is what we looking at it. So VFA, value flow analysis, this tells me the logical model to integrate the value generation from right from the input to the outputs. In between comes the process. We are talking about the inputs and the outputs, as far as the integral part of the process is all about it. This, and probably we have an operation out here, and then comes the output, as the case might be. So gain an insight on how the objectives can be measured from different perspective. Provide an overview of the process involved by achieving the flow. We have to understand the value flow analysis altogether. Enables the selection of the most relevant KPIs for the objective. The definitive KPIs, please, if possible, can we them all together? Remember, VFA or value flow analysis is where we are talking about it. The direction in which we goes around. This is the direction that is followed around. The object is situated at the very first thing. The input and the process is all about it, which comes with the outcome. Now, how do we go with the objective? As in the inpatient flow that comes around it, in terms of resources, in terms of any material that comes around, optimize the inflows. Then we'll talk about the availability of the staff. What we are looking into it. Now there is the process, as far as the maybe if it is a service industry, the length of stay. If it is a production industry, it's the number of output, or TPAs that we call it, ton per day or something like that. So we talk about everything as to the outputs, the results, the bed turnovers, everything, and then operating cost and the revenue cost per the RPU per users, as the case next might be, let us understand the metrics, input metrics, measure the quantity, quality of the input resources to the organizational activity. This is pertinent. This is very true. We'll talk about general things, which include financial resources, which include human resources, which include infrastructures. Example: the number of employees as far as human resources compare, the number of managers as far as the human resources concerned, the number of other implementation team member that has been there. So we talk about the human resources out here. We talk about the financial resources as far as the budget, overall budget. What are the grants? What are the debt which has been done, and what is the equity share that has been there? So we have to take the loans for infrastructure is medical equipment, which will come across it. We need to understand very thoroughly out here. That would be the input metrics. Is all about it. Talking about the process metrics, yes, measure the quantity, the quality of the services that has been provided to probably make the customer feel special. Generally include transformation in terms of time utilization rates. So example being time is on percentage delivery of the anything that we go around it. We will talk about the time to finalize a task. That is very important. Utilization of percentage of equipment utilized altogether, ambulance responses, and so on and so forth, that comes around it. It can be any of the responses that comes across it. Now we'll talk about the output metrics. Now this is what we are looking into it. Let us have measure quantity and quality of the good services. They generally includes quantifiable patient. Let me tell it to you with an example of a hospital. Now, which is an hospital come across it. As per his hospital, it's the number of patient that has been taken care of or been, let's say, vaccinated as such, right? The treatment which has been delivered, the surgeries that has been performed, the examination that has been completed. It is the OPD, the outpatient department, that has been looking into it. It tells me, it gives me a figure which is much more relevant, which is much more understandable and comprehensible in the longest run. So outcome is impact metrics, measure the quantity, quality of result achieved through the provisions of the goods and services. They generally include added values and impact. Let us have continue with the same example of an hospital, as in the incidence of the disease, the mortality rate, and the added values in terms of savings as far as innovation ideas is concerned, and net promoter scores. So again, we have the same process. If you look into it, we have clarified input, we have clarified process, we have clarified output, and this is what we are talking in terms of out impact. So as in value flow analysis, I have already, so this is the way the value will be flowing around it in terms of object, in terms of budget, in terms of process. Now we can marry it down with the BSC, the balance scorecard altogether. So what we are looking into is, as in the population, as in everything that comes around it, is a simple elaboration that has been given for a hospital per se. It's just an example of an hospital which gives you exacting about the population of the immunization, the budget, the doctors, the on-time delivery, the population vaccination, the incident of disease, and so on, the time to reach an emergency call, the patient being seen within less than 15 odd minutes, mortality rate on the emergency call, thereby. So we'll continue with the second segment. As far as the value chain analysis or value flow analysis is concerned, there are 12 areas that needs to be talking about it. It is the innovation champion. It is the focus group of innovations. We are talking about the customer that comes around it, the staff on the innovation program, the time to evaluate an idea, the budget that is being given around here. We will talk about the VFA again in terms of the ideas being evaluated, the targets within the 2 weeks, innovation ideas evaluated, being funded, being implemented. Now remember, these are all innovation ideas that might generate a value, might not. It is part of your value flow analysis that goes around it. So basically, if you give in an example of an university this time, if you look into it, the faculty recruited, the process, the student per teacher ratio, the output percentage of the student graduated, the outcomes at the student employed, new students, and student satisfaction, employee satisfaction that comes around it. So this is what we are looking at. So scenario is, select an object of your choice. You write at least two input, two processes, two output, two outcome metrics, and your job is done. So again, I repeat, at least two inputs, at least two processes, at least two output, at least two outcome metrics that comes around it. Select this metrics, two or three metric KPIs to measure the achievement of the objective. Propose one or two initiative of these metrics. Please come up with a conclusion which is to be finalized into a smaller number of recommendations. That is what we look into it. So now comes the KPI balancing as to what you are doing about it. It is your quality assurance technique in the consisting selection of the two KPIs per objective. Why? To avoid focusing on certain KPIs on the exposures of the others. Definitely yes. We do not want to compromise. We do not want to subsume any other of the KPIs. Let us focus one at a time to provide a wider perspective upon the actual performance thereby. So KPI balancing is of the anything. Let us continue. Let us start with again with the hospital example, wherein it tells you about the frequently asked questions would be about the ambulance service, the surgery service, the facility management. So we need to understand the objective. As in ambulance services, can we provide an on-time ambulance services? What are the KPI metrics? Can be surgery conducted, flu cases, diagnosis accuracy. In terms of surgery services, can we have reliable surgery services as an objective? Definitely, probably, yes. Why not? So we need to understand the discharge per day, the ambulance available, the time to conduct a laboratory test as the KPI. These are the metrics. These are essentially the metrics comes around it. These are the broad objective that goes around it, and the FAQs that comes n numbers of time every now and then as in KPI balancing is concerned. So we need to understand each of the fact or aspects of a business operation. This example that I've cited to you is hospital. Remember of what does it goes around it, the leading indicators and the lagging indicators. The leading indicators are the incident of non-compliance. It will tell it to you, are you ahead of the curve or far behind the curve. Training asks for FTE is full-time employees that we're talking about it. Lagging indicators would be after an accident has occurred. It might be detrimental altogether. Employees with the competencies at desired level. We talk about the efficiency is the new customer acquisition cost and the call duration cost, the effectiveness, the new customers, and the first call resolution that goes around it as effective as you are possibly. We'll talk about the quantity. Quantity in terms of the leading indicators, which gives me a maintenance request and resolve around it. Ideas expressed. Then comes the quality, as in the percentage of the maintenance request resolved within SLA or within the stipulation time. The ideas implemented there, the patient sensitivity, the net promoter scores, the objectivity of the complaints, and so about it. Now, this is what we need to go around every now and then. This is what we will be speaking every now and then together. So continue with the same example. This is what the sales funnel will tell me. This will give me the Henrich pyramid as per the number of accident with or without injuries, the minor incidents, so on and so forth. As the sales funnel, the number of consumers, the contract signed, the proposal, the meeting arranged, the prospects, and so on and so forth. As far as innovation funnel, it is the amount of fund being generated, the ideas being generated, ideas been implemented, evaluated, and so on and so forth. This is what we are looking at. KPI balancing is all about. Next comes the selection workshop. Yes, this is very important. After you have done about it, you will come and you will come with a proposal and present it in front of the management as to what are the KPIs that needs to be monitored time and again. So why? The question is why. It is having a collective insights, the intelligence I'm talking about it. Everybody will hear your presentation, will come to know what exactly is the issue. They will add their perspective to it, and probably we can work something in a win-win situation. There is a proper learning by all the stakeholders, the buy-in that comes around it. Who the clients, definitely yes. Who will benefit it or who should participate in the workshop? The supplier, yes. The employers, yes. The board, definitely. The management, the facilitators, and we have it. We have the complete circle of the stakeholders who are pivotal to the success of an or the operation. We come to the fag end of the presentation as with the third steps is all about documentation, all about recording the KPI measurement limitation. What is CBA? CBA is cost benefit analysis that we comes around it. The first performance review meeting is the review and reconsidering of some KPIs that may prove inefficient to measure and report in practice that comes around it, which I have just shown with you an example as what exactly the net promotion or any of the KPI documentation is all about it. How do you go across and formulate? Remember, at the fag end, if we want to go about the performance criteria, this is what is all about it. It should be relevant, it should be defined, it should be clearly balanced, as in what is the concern around here. This is what we are looking at it. It should be relevant, it should be clearly defined, it should be completely balanced as such. This is what we are looking into it. Remember, the performance criteria should be of attainable, being complete, being direct, being incentivized, should be practical, reliable, specific, tested, time bounded, and definitely of utilities to the management. With this, I come to an end of this presentation. Thank you for watching this video.